The concept really here in Maker City was that economic reinvention was probably going to be a bottom-up thing. Ideas would flow up from cities as people found what they were good at, as innovators came into those cities, as kind of entrepreneurs met up with real estate and economic development people, created innovation centers, created local opportunity. And likely the future was going to be a bunch of connected ideas and experiments that would then lead to what we're going, as opposed to some top-down big idea that came from Lyndon Johnson or the New Deal or Washington. And so if you think about kind of big trends that are going on in the world, this trend towards decentralization and real-time learning and networks is happening very quickly. As Steve Glickman talked to us in another episode that you did, the whole concept behind Opportunity Zones is decentralized, local, bottom-up community development, because that's where you can run lots of experiments, where ideas can be prototyped. And this is also a very practical thing, because we don't really have top-down, huge HUD-oriented programs anymore. You could argue that the right never really liked that, and the left is learning that it's actually a lot better to run a lot of these experiments. And by the way, decentralization, you see it in utilities. We want more resilience in local utilities because big grids have brittleness. You see it in the emergence of cryptocurrency because you want more local resilient mechanisms. Well, Opportunity Zones as a program is like that. Of course, to do a good job, you need lots of good local ideas, or else you'll get either gentrification or condos. And the concepts behind the Maker City, really two big concepts. One, from the maker world, is this notion that manufacturing can be more customized, that you can actually do things more locally, and that can train people and you can learn from it. So there's a whole kind of continuous learning component to it. And there's also this notion of maker, that you are actually the maker of the city. You're involved. It doesn't just come from City Hall. You have a role. You can create. You can prototype. And that engages more people in planning. And some of the most interesting stuff we're seeing in Opportunity Zones are temporary structures that come up that create value, that local artisans are creating things. They're working with entrepreneurs. That creates value in a part of town that might have been a poor part of town or didn't attract people. And out of that, economic development can come. So this is a kind of a localist-based concept that marries up both with making as a distributed way, this economic program, and some of the big trends going on.
Yeah. Well, I have to be very frank. I'm really quite on the shelf about Opportunity Zones. I'm not sure it's going to work. And, I say that for many reasons. Number one, I think there are a lot of fraudsters and hype artists out there promoting funds and getting sucker real estate investors into their funds and their deals. But that's not the program's fault, okay? There's always going to be shysters, right? That's just part of fallen human nature, okay? So that's going to exist anywhere. But it seems to me like the way to fix a lot of these problems is really through skills and motivation of the actual people and the workers. And while the Opportunity Zone may well and probably will, at least to an extent, improve these areas and make the neighborhoods nicer, I don't know that it's going to improve people's brains or their motivation. It's not just a matter of having the skills to work and be successful in the new economy. You also got to have the motivation, right? And if they're on the dole and, what's the incentive to get off of it, right? You can probably tell where my politics are, so forgive me. But don't you think that's sort of the core of the problem?
You're absolutely correct. If this was a program that built nice things and didn't lift up communities, figure out a way to do workforce development, and kind of build into the community some sense of lifelong learning, progressive enroll, all you have would be kind of the continually building of things for communities where people didn't care.
And they probably couldn't afford to live in them. So it'd be gentrification problem, right?
Exactly, because if you can't lift up incomes and make people part of the middle class, what do you get? More of the same. Yeah. So this is the essential problem here. So if you get to the core of this, the good news is, it's a lot of private capital. It's an opportunity. It's the possibility of building out the next American frontier. That is to willfully think through, at a time of technical and economic change, what do we need to do? And we could write that down. I'm going to get to that in a moment. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is, if you build a program and you mostly bring in existing real estate investors that are used to particular kind of IRRs, and then they go for kind of the adjacent
that's internal rate of return, a metric of success on
essentially, if you get investors that are used to doing one thing, and people putting funds together that want to go build the project with the highest return, you'll get hotels and condos near downtown areas, and you'll leave this thing out. So the tantalizing thing here is, how could you motivate capital? or even put some rules around it, guidelines, some set of metrics so that you could define and envision and then fund things with significant change. And that's the tension right now. The articles that you read in the New York Times that say what's going on here are saying it's just more stuff for the rich. On the other side of this, on people who are urbanists and trying to bring about change, our belief is if you can bring in impact capital that actually wants to make long-term changes, perhaps augment that with certain philanthropic and charitable things that make some of this stuff more successful, a lot can happen. So, for example, a number of foundations, Kresge Foundation and Rockefeller Foundation, Milken has been part of this, the Omidyar Foundation is part of this, have looked at could we come up with a set of impact guidelines that people could self-report on, and then could charitable foundations guarantee projects or be last money out in a mechanism that could swing things to profitability. And there are projects, for example, there's a project going on in the Midwest right now that's going to buy a big auto parts manufacturer and then also work on building affordable housing in that area. So it's workforce housing for people who are there. There's another project in the Intermountain West, which is a large project that's actually, it's a space that attracts a lot of people for particular amusement participating purposes. The people who pay to go there tend to be from cities, but there's a whole community there that has to commute a lot. You can build housing around that. As we've looked at projects, there's a very interesting thing going on in Fresno that brings all at once a community place where startups can come, training of the kids of essentially agricultural workers in coding, together with investment in that. So what you're doing is you're bringing together people who understand, say, startup and business culture, the sons and daughters of agricultural workers who might never thought they'd have a good job, but now they're being trained for jobs which exist, and it's creating a culture of possibility. So those are examples of things that work well. So what there is to do, I think, is take people doing innovative stuff, work together, put some capital in it, and prove things we can do.